I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another edition of The Best Movie You Never Saw. And this week we're taking a look at a movie that I'm sure a lot of you in fact have seen, called Hard Boiled, directed by John Woo and starring Chow Yun-Fat and Tony Leung. Now, I know this one is going to get me into a bit of trouble because everybody's going to tell me, Chris, this is a classic. This is not a Best Movie You Never Saw because we all saw it. If only that were true. The thing about Hard Boiled is that, yes, to a generation, I'm sure that it is a classic, but I'm also sure that there are many reviewers out there that have never seen a John Woo movie that's not in English. It just is what it is. So, if you do want to dig into an absolutely amazing chapter in action cinema, basically what was going on in the 1980s and 1990s in Hong Kong, the best place to start is with one of John Woo's classic movies, like The Killer or this week's entry, Hard Boiled. So in it, his iconic leading man, Chow Yun-Fat, plays a Hong Kong inspector named Tequila, who's trying to take down an army of gangsters led by Anthony Wong's character. He runs afoul of a high-ranking triad assassin played by Tony Leung, who, of course, turns out to actually be an undercover cop who's deep undercover. The two of them eventually team up in an explosive finale set at a hospital that goes on for something like 40 minutes and stands as one of the greatest action sequences ever directed. John Woo was at an interesting place when this movie came out. He had blasted onto the scene in Hong Kong with A Better Tomorrow, which was a movie that established the heroic bloodshed genre. The heroic bloodshed genre basically took the tropes of kung fu cinema but replaced them with gunplay. It was something completely new for the era because, Hong Kong movies, for better or worse, were always seen as kind of kung fu movies, which of course they weren't all kung fu movies, but that was what exported the best. When they started doing these heroic bloodshed movies with gunplay, the movies started to export as well. Never quite as big as some of the Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan movies, but quite well nonetheless. Now, of this genre, the undisputed king was Chow Yun-Fat, and he was established as such by A Better Tomorrow, which cast him as a triad assassin named Mark Gore. Chow Yun-Fat in the film actually only played a supporting part, and his character was killed off at the end. But he was so popular that they built a sequel around his character's twin brother, which was called A Better Tomorrow 2, again directed by John Woo, and an even bigger hit than the first movie, although apparently the production was fraught. And in fact, the movie is a bit of a mess, but it has some absolutely amazing action set pieces, including a great finale where Chow Yun-Fat and his opponent pump bullets into each other and exchange pistols, which is actually excerpted in True Romance because Quentin Tarantino was a huge fan of this movie. After A Better Tomorrow 1 and 2, John Woo was at the top of his game and definitely established a major international reputation with the release of The Killer, which cast Chow Yun-Fat as a smooth-talking assassin, very much in the mold of Alain Delon from Le Samouraï. In this movie, once again, he's partnered with a tough cop played by Danny Lee to take down some triad gangsters after he accidentally blinds a singer. It's a terrific movie and really did establish Chow Yun-Fat's persona as kind of the tragic hero, with him wearing these beautiful suits and engaging in a ton of gunplay throughout. And of course, in this one, he was the star. He was not a supporting character, he was the leading man. Now, surprisingly, The Killer, while successful in Hong Kong, was not maybe as successful as everybody thinks. Internationally, it was one of John Woo's most acclaimed films and probably one of his most famous, but it was more of a hit internationally than it was domestically. After that, John Woo kind of went crazy. He directed a movie called Bullet in the Head, which was, I think, a masterpiece, but was a film that was very difficult to make. John Woo in interviews actually said that it was his reaction to the Tiananmen Square massacre, and even called it his own version of Apocalypse Now, meaning that it had the same personal toll on him as Apocalypse Now had on Francis Ford Coppola. Chow Yun-Fat didn't star in this movie, but Tony Leung did, and Simon Yam played a very Chow Yun-Fat-esque character. It's a really cool movie, kind of obscure these days, but too bad because it is really one of his masterpieces. But another movie that was kind of difficult to make, and there's many different versions of the movie out there. Some of them end in a great car chase, others end in a very kind of dramatic moment where the hero just cold-bloodedly assassinates the villain. It's a tough movie to track down, but a really good one. So after this, Chow Yun-Fat and John Woo reteamed on a movie called Once a Thief, which teamed them with Leslie Cheung, who was a huge star at the time and unfortunately took his own life several years later. Once a Thief is very different from the usual John Woo movie. It had lots of action, but also had heavy doses of comedy, which was something that Chow Yun-Fat was actually becoming quite known for at the time. As big as his action movies were, he was also a much in-demand leading man in terms of romance and comedy, and some of his most successful movies, such as God of Gamblers, really mixed the two genres together. God of Gamblers is a particularly strange movie because it's like Rain Man meets John Woo. It's a very, very strange film. So Once a Thief was a big hit, and they decided to reteam on Hard Boiled. But one of the issues about their other movies together was that critics had said that they were glamorizing triads, and sure enough, they were glamorizing triads, which was kind of the Hong Kong version of the mafia. So in this one, John Woo decided to make his leading man a cop, a tough cop who doesn't play by the rules, named Tequila, basically Hong Kong's answer to Dirty Harry. So in this one, Chow Yun-Fat would drop the cool suits, not really wear sunglasses, and just dress like kind of a working class cop. He did, however, keep some of his trademarks, such as the two-fisted pistol packing. And if John Woo's movies up to this point had been action-packed, Hard Boiled dwarfs any of those by comparison. Just the opening tea house shootout itself would be the climax to most movies, but is only the introduction here. I mean, it's an insane movie, and I remember seeing it on the Canadian version of HBO First Choice as a kid. And I remember just thinking, I'd watch the beginning of this movie because I knew that John Woo had gone on to direct Hard Target, a movie that I thought was pretty cool at the time, but I wasn't much interested in foreign films. However, the opening tea house shootout in this movie blew me away, and I remember telling all my friends about it who were also into action movies and trying to get them to watch it with me. I mean, guys, come on, you like action? This movie is action, like super action, non-stop from beginning to end. But alas, for a while, my love of John Woo and Hong Kong action movies was a bit, one might say, niche. So, Hard Boiled, if you've seen it, is absolutely an undisputed classic of the action genre, and Chow Yun-Fat is terrific as Tequila, the cop hero. Tony Leung, however, who at the time was becoming more and more popular thanks to his movies with Wong Kar-wai and was kind of the preeminent romantic lead in Hong Kong, is also really good as the undercover cop that he befriends. Tony Leung at the time was actually already John Woo's kind of second favorite leading man, with him having played the lead in Bullet in the Head. He would later famously play the lead in Redcliffe after Chow Yun-Fat stepped down in a much publicized incident. So why is this movie so good? I mean, why not? It's just non-stop action. It's about 2 hours and 10 minutes long. It's very stylish for a Hong Kong movie. Beautiful neon lit photography and some of the best action scenes you've ever seen. Like I said, the opening tea house action scene would be a good enough finale in any other movie, but it's only the introduction here. There's another really great warehouse shootout about halfway through the film, which blew my socks off when I was a kid. But then what's even better is the ending 40 minutes where all the characters just kind of come together and start whacking each other and killing each other off. And it's chaotic but amazing. So many of the parts in this movie are great. Teresa Mo plays kind of Chow Yun-Fat's love interest. She has a really good scene where she's trying to protect babies in a hospital and blows away a triad assassin. There's a guy named Mad Dog in the film who's kind of the skilled gunfighter that works for the main villain in the movie, Johnny Wong, played by Anthony Wong. Philip Kwok played this guy, and he was a famous martial arts choreographer at the time. And at the end of the movie, he suddenly becomes a good guy when Johnny Wong starts mowing down some innocent civilians. It's a really cool scene. Anthony Wong typically played villains in all of these movies at the time, but oddly enough is dubbed in this film because I don't think John Woo and him really got along. It's too bad because Anthony Wong really is one of the better actors of his generation. Chow Yun-Fat has never been cooler than he is here, especially at the end of the movie where he's running around with a baby in his arm and shooting bad guys. At one point his leg gets set on fire and the baby actually puts out the fire with his urine. Now, this would kind of be a silly scene in any other movie, but John Woo makes it operatic, and these guys are just like throwing around babies like footballs and shooting each other. It's pretty amazing, but I couldn't see them ever doing anything like it in an American movie. So, like a lot of John Woo's other movies, Hard Boiled was successful in Hong Kong, but not as successful as one might think. However, it played Midnight Madness at the Toronto International Film Festival, and the audiences just went berserk for it, were stomping their feet and cheering. And this is really what led to John Woo becoming such an in-demand director internationally, with him then going on to direct Hard Target with Van Damme, and then Broken Arrow with John Travolta and Christian Slater, which was a big hit. And then finally, his kind of opus in North America, Face Off, starring John Travolta and Nicolas Cage. He would eventually direct Mission Impossible 2 starring Tom Cruise, and would eventually be considered one of the most bankable action directors of his era. His career petered out a little bit around the mid-2000s with movies like Wind Talkers and Paycheck, and he eventually went back to China, where his output has definitely been decidedly mixed. The Redcliffe films are great, the Crossing films are not, and he recently did a return to heroic bloodshed with this movie called Manhunt, which has its moments but is also very, very bad at certain points. It's on Netflix now, and One of the things I think that the movie suffers from is that it doesn't have a really strong leading man like Chow Yun-Fat. John Woo and Chow Yun-Fat never worked together again after this movie, and it's really a shame. They did kind of work together, where John Woo apparently came in to reshoot the last gunfight in a Chow Yun-Fat movie called Peace Hotel, and he actually produced a couple of his early American starring vehicles, but the two fell out after Redcliffe. I think the two do have some differences, both personally and perhaps even politically. Now, Chow Yun-Fat has always been one of my favorite leading men, and when I was younger, I really did get into a lot of these Hong Kong movies. I used to go to Chinatown to pick up VCDs, which were kind of a weird format that existed only in Asia. Never really came over here, but you could actually play them in your PlayStation 1 if you had one, and also on your computer. You know, there are a couple of really cool Chow Yun-Fat movies that I thought I would recommend you guys. If you're not overly concerned with PC, you should definitely check out the movie God of Gamblers, although at one point in the movie, Chow Yun-Fat's character gets hit on the head and has the mind of a child, and it's not necessarily the most enlightened depiction of the mentally challenged I've ever seen, but it's kind of a fun movie. The sequel, God of Gamblers Return, has a really good opening, but otherwise is kind of dull. Tiger on the Beat is a really fun one, and it has a really good chainsaw fight at the end with Conan Lee, who kind of disappeared from martial arts action cinema at some point. Too bad. Another classic, of course, is Full Contact, with Chow Yun-Fat acting for one of his other favorite directors in Hong Kong, Ringo Lam, who unfortunately died recently. It's a really amazing movie that has these great bullet's eye POV shots. He did a couple other really cool movies for Ringo Lam, including City on Fire, which was essentially remade as Reservoir Dogs, and the Prison on Fire series. His American output has been mixed, I would say. The Replacement Killers is a really stylish, fun movie, and I really enjoyed his follow-up to that, The Corruptor, which cast him opposite Mark Wahlberg in this kind of crime drama directed by James Foley. I think those two movies are great, but I was never a huge fan of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Anna and the King was okay, and he was fine in the Pirates of the Caribbean 3 movie, but otherwise, Chow Yun-Fat's career, I think, has kind of petered out so much, which is really too bad. Although I think he's kind of happily quasi-retired. I do hope he makes a huge comeback at some point, though, because he still looks pretty good, even though he's like 66 years old. And I would really love to see him do another movie with John Woo, because I think the two of them together are just electric. And hopefully whatever differences they have, if they do indeed have any differences, can be put aside. But if you want to see these two guys at their absolute best, check out Hard Boiled. It's one of my favorite Hong Kong action movies of all time, and something of a masterpiece. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, because it really is the best movie you never saw. And if you like this kind of content, make sure to click on the bell. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.